I'm Cameron.
And I'm Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime.
Hayden.
Cameron.
How would you go about robbing a bank in the 1970s?
How would I rob a bank in the 1970s?
Yeah, what would be your approach?
Guns.
How many guns?
I don't know, but I certainly couldn't do it on my own.
Oh, so you're not doing this by yourself?
Absolutely not. Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, there will be more than just me.
Okay.
So I guess...
Any other details in this robbery?
I am going to recruit people to help me. And not only will I recruit people to help me, but I will not do any of the work on my own.
Okay, so they're getting a cut.
I probably won't do any of the work.
So you're not getting a cut?
I'm getting a cut. I'm putting it together.
And then you're splitting it with everybody?
No. Not evenly, but yes.
Oh, I don't know how this works, but okay.
They're not going to know. They're too dumb.
But they're the ones doing the work.
Good for them. Work hard. This is capitalism.
I don't know that capitalism applies to bank robbery.
I think it does.
Right.
I'm the fat cat at the top, and they're the little rodents doing my bidding.
It makes me think of the opening scene of The Dark Knight, where the Joker has everybody like take each other out, and then he's the last guy, and he takes out the last man standing so that everybody else does the bulk of the work, and he just drives the school bus into the... No? Not ringing any bells?
I think I've seen those Batman films, but I don't remember anything about them.
I love The Dark Knight.
I just remember that Katie Holmes was in one of them.
I think she was in the first one.
And then Maggie Gyllenhaal replaced her.
Correct.
That's all I could tell you about the Batman films. Well, Christian Bale is Batman, and Heath Ledger plays the Joker until he died.
Well, he played the Joker.
Yeah.
He died after that film, I think.
But I think that, like, he was still recording, and then they had to, like...
change up what the third movie was going to be?
Yeah, and use kind of, like, found film to fill in the blanks.
Oh, for the second movie?
I don't know. I'm just saying things. That could be wrong. Why did you ask me about Batman?
Well, you said that you were going to have everybody else do all the work, and you were going to take the profit, and I said it reminds me of the Joker in the opening scene of The Dark Knight.
Yeah, no, I don't like getting in trouble, and I don't like working. Let me rephrase. I enjoy working. I don't like doing work that's hard, physically.
And it would be hard to rob a bank?
Yeah.
Don't you just walk in with a gun and a note, and you slip it to them, and they slip money in a bag?
I feel like there's got to be more to it.
But in the 70s.
Okay, in the 70s, nothing was digital.
Right, there's
Everything
not
would have
an
been
alarm
cash.
button.
Well, there could be an alarm button.
There's probably not.
Okay, wild conjecture on both of our parts. I don't know. I guess I'm just not criminally minded. I don't know how to do that.
That can't be true.
What would you do?
I don't know what I would do. Oh. The question was for you.
Oh, okay. So you have no idea how you would pull off a bank robbery.
No, but I do know a story of a bank robbery that I'm going to tell you.
Oh, I can't wait.
It starts on the evening of September 11th, 1971.
Oh, foreboding. September 11.
It's in London.
I mean, it was kind of a major international terrorist attack we're talking about.
This is not foreboding.
It's like reverse foreboding. It's like flashback foreboding.
All right. 1971. A man in London by the name of Robert Rowlands was scanning radio channels when he heard something peculiar. He was pretty sure that he was listening to a crime in progress. And he was right. It was one of the most costly crimes of its kind in British history, and it might have been ordered by the royal family.
Oh, intrigue. The royal family. The queen was the queen then. She's dead now.
She has since passed, but yes, she ruled for over 75 years.
Okay. Why would she have needed to rob a bank?
So I'm going to back up 7 months. In February of 1971, Reg Tucker rented a security deposit box at the Lloyds Bank on Baker Street. He visited his box no less than 13 times.
Where is Baker Street?
London.
Like, you know what? That's good enough for me. London is good enough for me. Was it like in a wealthy part of London? Was it in a poor part of London? Did Reg have money?
I don't know. I don't know if it was in a wealthy part of London.
I'm just trying to figure out what kind of bank the Queen needs to rob.
Okay, it was maybe a robbery that was ordered by the royal family. Maybe. And I will get into why. You're going to have to give me a little while, though.
Okay. I can be patient.
So like I said, Reg visited his box no less than 13 times, and each time the bank teller opened his box and left the room, making sure that he had his privacy, which was customary in the 1970s. But Tucker did not go in to worry with his possessions. What the bankers couldn't have known was that Tucker had been brought in on a plan to rob Lloyd's bank by Anthony, or Tony, Gavin.
Tony.
Tucker was using his body and his umbrella to figure out the exact dimensions of the vault, garnering more precise information with each trip to the bank.
His body and an umbrella?
Yes. That allowed him to draw a map to scale, including the location and dimensions of all the furniture in the room. Here's my best guess. He's using the umbrella, he's laying it down, and then he's standing with his feet at the end of the umbrella, and then moving it to the other side of his feet so that he is the stationary thing that's anchoring the umbrella. Because if he was just taking the umbrella and moving it, there's room for error in that. And I think he was really trying to give it the old mastermind treatment.
Okay, were tape measures invented yet? Or did he just think, an umbrella is a much more efficient way to do this?
I don't actually know when the retractable tape measure was invented. I do have to assume it was probably before 1971, but why are you trying to take some of the fun out of this? Obviously, this was...
I'm just looking for efficacy, but I love the whimsy of an umbrella. Mary Poppins, go off.
You did not introduce a tape measure into your plan to rob the bank.
Well, again, I'm not a criminal. I don't know where to start.
But neither was Reg Tucker. That's why Gavin chose
His name
him.
is Reg. He's a criminal.
No, he's not. Well, he wasn't before this, which is why Tony Gavin selected him, because he had no criminal record and he wasn't going to bring about any suspicion. And Gavin also chose Lloyd's Bank for a very particular reason, and that's because it was located on Baker Street. Baker Street was the home of the fictional character Sherlock Holmes. And after all, Gavin's big scheme to rob Lloyd's Bank came straight off the pages of a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novel, where bank robbers tunnel under and into the vault of a bank, at which point their plans were thwarted when they came face to face with Sherlock himself. And Gavin was a huge, huge Sherlock Holmes fan, so he thought, if I just tunnel into Lloyd's Bank, I'll finally get to meet my hero.
Does he know that fiction is
not
a work of truth?
No.
Okay.
Because he was trying to meet Sherlock Holmes.
He thought this was an autobiographical work. He could meet Sherlock.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the real treasure.
Of course. And then anything else collected during the robbery was just a added bonus. Okay, so he didn't actually think that he was going to meet Sherlock. But kind of to your point, this was not something that he thought was going to be the work of one or even two people. He had several associates that he brought in on this plan, one of which was close with an employee at Lloyd's Bank. And so they had the beneficial information that the floor alarm in the vaults had been shut off due to recent construction, constantly setting it off. So because there was construction happening nearby, the alarms were being set off at a rate that caused it to be an inconvenience, so they just shut the floor alarm off, assumably until the construction was done. And then I'm sure they were going to remember immediately after that to have that shit turned back on.
Wow, that is some really helpful insider tea.
Yeah, it would be helpful if you read that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novel and concocted this scheme to...
Well, like him telling, like them knowing about the floor alarm.
Right.
Yeah.
So Thomas Stevens, an employee of Gavin's who sold secondhand cars, was responsible for bringing in the tools that would be used to create the tunnel through which they would gain access to the floor of the vault. Again, not a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 person job. Other people were allegedly brought in on the plan, and that included experts on explosives and alarms, 2 associates who were not identified, and Benjamin Wolfe, who had connections to a gang. So we're really on the spectrum here. We've got Reg Tucker, no criminal history. We've got Benjamin Wolfe, gang affiliation. We're running the gamut of...
So this is some weird infantry militia bullshit.
It's also, you asked if Lloyds Bank was, or if Baker Street was a rich area. It better be if they've got this many people in on this, because they're going to have to split the money.
That is a lot of people to split money with.
Yeah. And I don't actually know how many people were ultimately a part of this or thought that they were going to get any sort of cut. But
I mean, max is 4. I could share with 4 other people.
A max for you, not max here.
No. They're just adding people left and right.
Right. They're just like drinking at the local pub and they're like, hey, you want to get in on this scheme to help rob this bank? We're going to dig underneath it.
The more the merrier.
Sherlock's going to be there. It's going to be fucking great.
Idiots.
Yeah.
Dumb. This feels dumb.
So they had the plan in order, but there was a bit of a problem. You know where the tunnel ends.
Yeah, the bank.
The vault at Lloyd's Bank.
That's what I said.
But where does it begin? Where do you go to dig a tunnel underneath and into a bank without anybody knowing that you're doing it?
Adele's house.
Adele's house? Because she's from England.
She's from my house.
The ginger minge of it all. So they actually did not go to Adele's house. She hadn't yet been born.
Oh, okay.
They anticipated that it would take months to create this tunnel. So they needed an inconspicuous location for the starting point. And it came in the form of a storefront that became available only 2 doors down from the bank.
Oh, wow.
Convenient, right?
That's lucky.
And Wolfe, who was already a store owner, jumped at the opportunity to lease the vacant property.
Did he have a store on Baker Street?
I don't know, but I want to say he was the one that sold... No, he was the one with gang connections. So he probably had... I don't know. It would be really helpful if I knew anything about Baker Street. If it was like gang area or not. Anyway, so Wolfe leased the vacant property and they started digging this 40-foot tunnel. And that's just across.
What was their storefront? What was the business they pretended they were running?
I don't know that information.
Okay.
But I imagine it wasn't Wolfe's only storefront. Like he owned other stores. I imagine there was illegal activity happening in the back room.
Interesting.
As you can imagine, it was a slow process because they could only work on this tunnel on weekends or late at night.
Because they had jobs?
They wanted to make sure that other shop owners and employees would not overhear the tunneling and investigate the source of the noise. But also maybe it was like convenient because their schedule didn't really allow for them to do a lot of work outside of it. I don't know what the hours are on.
I think what you said was right. It has to be so that they're not caught.
Yeah. At one point, their tunnel met the wall of the next door chicken restaurant's basement.
Oh.
So despite having dug down already, they had to dig even further down than they had originally planned.
What in the Wile E. Coyote?
Honestly, that could also have been where they got this idea, if we're being honest.
Acme products?
Yeah, that's probably where the explosives expert came in. Yeah, it was just Wile E. Coyote.
It's just a Wile E. Coyote.
So it was estimated that it took about 3 months for the tunnel to be completed, but they got there. Once they had tunneled to the vault, they had 15 feet upwards to dig. And then the only thing that stood between them and their destination was another 3 feet of concrete.
Oh, just 3 feet of concrete? Once they dug 15 feet more?
Yeah. So I guess 18 feet if you count the concrete.
Did they dig straight up? Was it at an incline?
I don't actually know.
How thick was this tunnel?
I don't know about the size of the tunnel. I know that it was... I don't know.
Where did the dirt go?
I also don't know.
Okay.
I
have a lot of questions about the mechanics of this tunnel.
Yeah, well, I guess it can't have been so big that it would have compromised the foundation of the buildings above it.
Okay, also, does ground not just cave in on itself?
I don't know.
Okay, I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
It makes sense if they only had to dig like 3 feet below the surface. That would be less like confusing to me.
I feel like that would be more confusing to me. The fact that they went 15 feet down. Well, no, I guess to your point, both of them are confusing. Why is
I
it
don't know how any of it works. I don't understand like the physics or the structural integrity of a tunnel.
I feel like it would be, if they didn't dig down as far as they did, it would be more likely that the foundation would start to give because the support for the buildings. But then kind of to that point, the same goes for, like you said, does the dirt not just all cave in? Does it not all fall?
Yeah. I also, like, 15 feet down, how did they slope their tunnel so that they could move through it?
I don't know. I imagine Reg was down there with his umbrella.
It seems really preposterous to me. I also don't understand how, like, I know that Reg took his umbrella in his body and measured that facility, but I don't know how they
knew where the vault was?
Right.
Or how they assumably vault was.
Yeah, because it's not like they had air tags.
No. There were some oversights in this plan, which some of which were exposed on the night of September 10th when the group tried breaking through the vault floor with a thermal lance. But that caused a buildup of fumes and a lot of heat in the ventless, cramped space. So they did not put in some sort of ventilation system into their tunnel, even though they spent 3 months working on it.
I just imagine it's like these 8 guys all in a tunnel. They have like sand buckets and they're just shoveling it into each other's bucket and they're shoveling it back down the tunnel because I truly am at such a loss. I don't know where they're putting the dirt. I don't know where they're putting the soil. Also, I think about digging and how, okay, you can get down like a couple of feet with a manual shovel, but 15 feet? How hard is that soil?
How are they getting out of it?
Yeah, it's perplexing. I don't know if I'm giving these men enough credit. I don't know if Wile Coyote.
I think you're looking for Wile E. Coyote.
I kept saying cannoli.
Don't say cannoli.
Yeah.
I would eat one right now.
Wile Coyote could not make this tunnel work.
Honestly, I think the only place that this should have actually worked is a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Looney Tunes, yeah.
I don't know. Actually thinking about it is kind of blowing my mind. They had to have sloped the whole tunnel down.
That's what I would think.
And up, because otherwise I understand how you dig upwards. You just stand there and kind of wield the shovel above your head, but then how do you get up there? It had to be sloped. There had to be so much math that went into this for them to be able to precisely
a wild amount of math.
Well, and what was Reg doing out there? Was he leaving Lloyd's Bank and then standing on the corner with his little umbrella and taking measurements of how far? Actually, there had to have been a lot more planning, which makes sense because it said it took 3 months to dig the tunnel. I imagine they didn't wait 4 months after it was dug to make sure that it was stable before they tried to thermal lance their way into the vault. But Reg started this measuring back in February of 1971. So that's 7 months. So 3 months was probably somebody with an umbrella or maybe even a yardstick out there. Anyway, there was a lot of planning that had to go into it, but there was a lot of failure to plan for some of the circumstances once you were in the space. Like the type of heat that a thermal lance would put off while you're trying to break through 3 feet of concrete.
Okay, I still have questions, and I don't want us to get bogged down by this.
Yeah.
But what the fuck does a thermal lance run off of? Is it like a combustion engine? Is it like you have gasoline or diesel or kerosene? I
think it does have to have
lawnmower?
something because part of the issue was the buildup of fumes paired with the heat was the problem.
They should have been dead. There's no reason they should have lived other than sheer dumb luck.
Yeah. They haven't made it in, though. They haven't made it into the bank.
No, because they're idiots and thought a thermal lance was going to cut through 3 feet of... Okay, go ahead. Sorry, my bad.
So despite their efforts with this thermal lance, it did not break through the concrete floor. So they ultimately had to use an explosive to get the...
Subtle.
Yeah, you're trying to not draw any attention. But it was the middle of the night, right? So they had to abandon their efforts on the 10th because of the fumes and the heat and they probably should have died. They come back on September 11th in the evening after the bank and everything closed, and they use the explosive to break through the floor, the 3 feet of concrete that stood between them and this vault. And assuming that they got their measurements right, once the explosive went off, they would be able to enter the vault of the bank, which is what happened.
I can't believe these fuckers pulled it off.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it is surprising. But don't forget about Robert Rowlands, who was listening to them do this. And he knew that what he was listening to was a crime. Yeah. But how was he, what was he catching signals from the thermal lance? Did he hear the explosive go off? No. So some of the many men that were in on this scheme were in the tunnel. But there was one guy stationed on top of the roof of the bank.
The roof?
Yeah. He was on the roof of the bank, and he was communicating with the men in the tunnel by way of a walkie-talkie. And
who was on the roof?
One of the men on the scheme.
And Robert Rowlands is the guy who's listening in.
Mm-hmm. And, with the tunnel being like 15, 18 feet down and him being on the roof of the bank, I imagine that the signal of the walkie-talkie had to be pretty strong, which does explain how Robert Rowlands was picking it up on his radio. Again, he didn't know who, he didn't know where, and he didn't know what, but he knew that there was a crime that he was listening to on the radio. And so with that information, he called the police. But again, he didn't have any details. So they did not immediately rush out to Lloyds Bank to access the vault before the explosive bust through the floor so that Gavin could fulfill his wild dream of being thwarted in the middle of this bank robbery.
And you said this was in the middle of the night, right?
Middle of the night, yeah.
Why is this man listening to his radio in the night?
Well, it was in the evening. So it was after the bank closed when, they're running this storefront. So let's assume that it's something where it's like a clothing store and that it closes at 5 p.m. or whatever. They probably have these guys all inconspicuously showing up at random times and then kind of disappearing down into the basement, also inconspicuously. And then, it's closing time and all of these guys have entered, but none of them have left because they've gone down into the basement. And so they probably get started not long after the bank is closing, not long after the store is closing, and no word on when the chicken restaurant closed. But
Okay. Anyways, continue.
Yeah. So the officer who took Rowland's call did not believe that what he believed was a crime in progress was that. He did not think that it was anything to be concerned about. And he suggested that if Rowlands really thought what he was overhearing was worth worrying over, that he should record it. So he did. He used an old cassette and a radio to record Gavin and his posse breaking into the vault of Lloyds Bank.
Wow.
I would like to listen to that.
What a bad bitch. He said, you want to make fun of me? I'm going to record this shit.
Well, that was what they suggested he do. They're like, if you're really concerned about it, record it. And so he was like, I am really concerned about it, so I'm going to record it. And as he continued listening, he was able to better understand what he was overhearing, especially because breaking into a bank vault by tunneling underground 40 feet is really hard work. And the men grew tired, and they wanted to call it a night. But the lookout up in the fresh, clean, crisp air atop the bank was determined that the men that were crammed together in the tunnel underneath persevere throughout the night. So they compromised. The men would take 300,000 pounds to divide between themselves and would return in the early hours of the morning. If security came in and smelled all the fumes that the thermal lance had produced, they could escape and still have a hefty chunk of change to split up. But if not, they would be able to resume their robbery in the wee hours of the morning. And so what Rowlands had overheard gave him insight that he was overhearing a bank robbery. And instead of calling the police department back, he called Scotland Yard, who immediately became alarmed And they had the inefficient task of physically checking each of the banks within 10 miles of Rowland's home. Guess how many banks there were within the 10-mile radius in London? So 20 miles diameter.
20 miles diameter?
Yeah, 10-mile radius. Something about a circumference.
2 pi r. I don't know. 27, 30 banks?
Very close. 750.
750 banks?
750 banks.
In a 10-mile radius?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but everything was cash.
That's true.
I mean, cash and checks, and maybe some men had
I don't even know how.
cards by
I
this
can't
point.
figure out how banks worked. I don't want to try to figure it out. I don't know. I don't care. I don't know how they knew how much money you had. Don't know.
In the 70s?
Yeah, I don't know how they knew.
Okay. Most people...
Think how long it took for a check to go through.
No.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Okay. Go ahead.
It had to be a slow-moving process. The whole thing. And I think that security deposit boxes or safety deposit boxes were more prevalent back in the 70s than they are today necessarily. I think that when you take all of those things into consideration, does make sense that there were so many banks. It still seems excessive. It's more than I can really comprehend. So they had to spend the rest of the night and into the morning checking on all of these banks physically, which is also
nuts.
Right. So as Gavin and his accomplices had planned, they were back inside the vault early in the morning hours of Sunday, the 12th of September. And at that point, they were breaking into those boxes and compiling.
They got to go back for seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, that was the plan. They were too tired to carry on with this robbery that they'd been planning. And for 7 months, you plan it, and then you're just too tired.
I don't know. I kind of get it. Probably the most relatable part of their entire story.
Well, and that it wasn't just one person.
Yeah, no, that too.
So they're breaking into boxes, they're collecting money, they're collecting valuable items. And as it turned out, not a single member of the police force was likely to be a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle fan because they never gained access to these vaults. And actually, at one point, they were standing outside the vault while it was actively being robbed.
Not a soul can clock.
Not a soul can clock. They assumed that if there had been an intruder or a robbery taking place, that they would be able to see evidence of a break-in through the vault door. So it wasn't a bad idea.
It would have been a fine supposition to think that I don't need to check beyond just looking at the vault door, but unfortunately they were wrong.
But I think when you bring this many people in, that's where you run the risk of getting caught. Not because there are so many people, but because people talk.
They do.
So the more people there are to potentially talk, the more likely you are to have a blabbermouth amongst your group, associates, if you will. So on Monday morning, when the bank employees came in, they discovered the wreckage of the robbery and called the police. Upon their arrival, the police found that the team had broken into and emptied approximately 270 boxes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Which is only a fraction of the number of banks that there are in a 10-mile radius. And the boxes were scattered around the floor of the vault. An estimated 3 million pounds worth of stolen money and valuables.
3 million?
Yeah.
My God, that's like 75 million in today's currency.
And that's not even converting it to US dollars.
That's wild. I don't know if it's 75. I just made that up.
Yeah, adjusted for inflation, we don't know. And a clue that was left behind by Gavin because he just could not help himself that said, "Let's see how Sherlock Holmes solves this one."
What a fucking idiot.
Well,
Sherlock Holmes solves it in the novel.
Right, but I just can't imagine reading, and I guess it makes sense that I can't imagine it, but reading Sherlock Holmes and siding with the villain in the Sherlock Holmes story. Like, who's reading Sherlock Holmes and they're like, you know who I want to be like when I grow up? The guy that Sherlock Holmes thwarts. The guy that Sherlock Holmes is after. The bitch that's only in one book.
I love that that's the wild part to you, when all I can think is that if I were the cop that found the note that said, "Let's see how Sherlock solves this one," I'd be like, wow, what a good fucking question. Who cares? Who knows?
You're the cop. You're like, that ain't.
Yeah, like it's so weird. I'd be like, you're living in your own little head. Like, there's no way I can beat you when you play by your own rules.
Right. Well, they didn't need Sherlock on this case because the police. How would you solve this?
I assume that the best way to solve a case where someone tunneled into the bank is to follow the tunnel to the other side.
That is exactly what they did. They went into Lesac basement.
Okay.
That Wolf had leased in his own name.
Stupid.
Which led police directly to him and to his associate. So Gavin, Stevens, and Tucker were all brought in for questioning. Wolf pleaded not guilty and served 8 years in prison, while Gavin, Stevens, and Tucker pleaded guilty, and they were behind bars for 12 years.
They got more time than the one who pleaded not guilty?
They got more time than the one who pleaded not guilty, whose name was on the property through which the tunnel was started.
Oh my... Okay.
Like, the only one who they really could say definitively was a part of this scheme. Your basement was used as the starting point.
Do they have juries in Britain? Because if it's a jury of your peers, I don't know. I could see how maybe they'd be like, good for you, dog. But
maybe.
I have no idea how the British judicial system works.
Yeah. Well, they suspected that this group was not the only group of people that were involved in this crime, but there were no other arrests that were made. And then if you recall, I did mention the royal family maybe being behind this robbery, and you seemed intrigued by that.
I am.
So let's get into this. Princess Margaret sounded like a good fucking time.
Of course.
Yeah. She lived her best life. She knew that it was very unlikely that she'd ever be queen because she was not the oldest child in her family, or like, I don't understand royal hierarchy in a way that would make me know why she felt it was unlikely. So she married Anthony Armstrong Jones.
Oh.
And after that, she had several trysts with several men who were not Anthony Armstrong Jones.
Good for her.
All right. Work. She ate. And this is not mere speculation. They have proof of some of these affairs via love letters, and some were just fun to talk about. They may not have been entirely true, but they were truly fun to discuss. Such as her alleged romantic connection to Mick Jagger. I imagine you didn't expect to hear about Mick Jagger today.
I didn't have that on my agenda, but interesting. Okay, Rolling Stone.
Yeah, but he's not really part of this.
Oh, okay.
Other than allegedly being romantically linked to Princess Margaret. So, getting back to the relevancy, or the potential relevancy. As I said, Princess Margaret enjoyed herself, and she and her friends were often known to visit the island of Mustique in the Caribbean. And when they visited, they brought cameras with them, which is not super surprising today because we all carry cameras in our pocket, but that was not necessarily a common practice at this point.
Yeah, not a camera on the island of Mustique.
And the cameras were used to capture further proof of the princess's non-husbandy fun times, such as her romantic connection with a man 17 years younger than her. And photos of her in what could have been considered compromising or scandalous circumstances.
Okay, diva.
Yes, but I think that we're talking topless sunbathing photos or things like that. Like, just kind of hanging out sans clothes.
Okay. Scandal.
Yeah. So these photos, as the theory goes, ended up in the hands of a man from Trinidad named Michael X, who happened to have a security deposit box at Lloyds Bank at the time of the walkie-talkie robbery, as it was known. People speculated that this was why, several days after the robbery, a D notice was put into place. You know what a D notice is?
I have no idea what a D notice is.
It's an order passed down by the government prohibiting the media from publishing information about the robbery.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound free.
No, that's not giving USA First Amendment.
No.
But we're not in the US.
No. You're right.
We're in the UK, which is arguably where they have fewer limitations on media.
I guess not.
Well, not when it comes to this robbery. They claimed that this was a matter of national security and they weren't willing to compromise. But was this D-notice really pushed forward by the royal family since they were behind the bank robbery in order to get the photos of Princess Margaret out of Michael X's security deposit box? And why did the police search 750 banks within a 10-mile radius when Robert Rowlands' radio could have only picked up a signal from these walkie-talkies within a mile of his location?
OMG. Only within a mile?
Yeah.
And they searched within a 10-mile radius?
Yes, but how would they know the caliber of walkie-talkies that were being used?
Well, I guess if they didn't know, that makes sense. But if they did know...
I doubt they knew.
Okay.
How would you know?
I don't know. I'm not a radio transistor transmitter expert, but I don't know. I feel like they could have made some assumptions.
I mean, I guess you start closer to Rowlands and then you move out, but they were standing outside the vault while they were robbing it.
Yeah.
Or at least while there was a hole in the ground. They may not have been actively robbing it. That might have been when they were taking their little snoozer.
Taking their little break.
Mm-hmm. The Princess Margaret photograph cover-up conspiracy has all but been debunked. And I imagine that the same police officers who sure-janned Robert probably did not know the limitations of radio signals picking up criminal activity being conducted using walkie-talkies at the time. Probably still not very high on the list of knowledge that your local police department has.
Not things you just know off the top of your head.
No. This part was interesting to me, so I'm going to include it. Over 100 people apparently would not enumerate the contents of their boxes.
Okay, so more than 100 people? Or 100?
Over 100 people would not say what was in their safety deposit box.
Wow, naughty.
So the amount that they got away with could have been more like 4 million pounds or more.
Right.
One of the things, I did not include this, but it just is skeevy, so I'm going to tell you. One of the things that they found in several boxes were used women's underwear.
Oh my God. Like used panties? Like lingerie? Or just like...
They used women's underwear. Yeah.
Gross.
Yes.
Men are nasty.
That's rich, assuming that it was the men doing that.
Yeah, we know who it was.
So that's the story of the Lloyds bank robbery, or the walkie-talkie robbery, as it was known. No word on if we're under the D notice.
What a weird... I know we've said it, but talk about Wile E. Coyote bullshit.
Yeah.
And to think, why Tom Wolfe? Was his name Tom?
Benjamin
Wolfe decided to lease that in his actual name. And...
Well, because he already had storefronts, so it seemed legit from the outside, right?
Right. Except now you are the only person who they know for sure is connected to this building where the tunnel came from.
But he got the least amount of time.
You know, you don't shit where you sleep. Or you don't shit where you eat. Whatever it is. And so I feel like...
Depends on what I ate.
If you're gonna commit a crime... I don't think that I would have chosen to get a storefront in my own name.
Here's what I think happened. They thought that this was a really great idea. And they got away with a lot of money. And I don't think that a lot of it was ever recovered. But they were too close. They weren't taking a step back. They were like, oh yeah, we'll get an explosives guy in here so that we can explode it. But they're not thinking about being in a tunnel while something is being exploded. They're not thinking about the heat. They're not thinking about even the shrapnel necessarily. They're not thinking about, there are so many little oversights that they missed. Like, yeah, it makes sense to tunnel from the basement of a place that you're leasing so that you have access to it 24/7. But you're not thinking about how once you finish the tunnel, unless you fill it back in, they're going to be able to figure out exactly who was responsible for this. There were just so many areas where they were like, oh man, we're doing such a great job. We're doing a really great idea. Like, we've got this really great idea. Let's go. And they were missing some of the maybe most critical details that would have, had they thought them through, would have prevented them from being caught.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay. So some of the sources that I used, Wikipedia, I watched a movie called The Bank Job that was based on this case. And then I pretty heavily relied on icepop.com, but a complete list of sources and any links can be found in the show notes.
And that's all we've got for this episode. If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe and drop us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast or wherever you're listening.
Don't forget to recommend us to a friend, and make sure you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
Like us on Facebook at Until the End of Crime, and join our discussion group.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com, and we welcome questions, requests, or even episode suggestions.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much. Until the next crime.